All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Kathryn Sutton. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the senior UX UI designer at Aten Design Group. I'm really excited about today's webinar, which is all about how stakeholders can use design review meetings to give constructive feedback, collaborate on the work, and create high quality products that meet the project's goals and objectives. So whether you've been in dozens of design calls as a stakeholder or have yet to take on a big design project at your organization, I hope to leave you with helpful tips on how to provide really good feedback to your design team. So you'll notice here quite a bit that this webinar is going to be themed after Project Runway, a hit fashion reality show I hope most of you are familiar with. Before I knew I wanted to get into design, watching the critiques on Project Runway were always entertaining and of course, very frightening and very intimidating and very funny at times. Memories of this show has followed me throughout my passion design and my design education all the way to today. So let's have fun with Tim Gunn and talk about creative critiques. So what we'll be covering today are going to be about 7 different topics. So the purpose and value of multidisciplinary critique, what to ask during a design review, types of helpful and unhelpful feedback, what happens when new features pop up during the discussion, how to disagree constructively, and what happens if your team gets stuck. So when we are in design critique, typically this means that we're analyzing and providing feedback on a given design for its objectives. And those objectives are usually discussed and decided on during our discovery phases, information architecture and strategy phases, and are evaluating using a bunch of different deliverables such as discovering workshop reports, sitemaps, content models, wireframes, and so forth. And style tiles are another aspect of that too. So when we enter a design critique, we are typically checking the design to make sure that it's meeting those goals and objectives, solving the problems that we have been talking about this whole time. Critiques are ultimately a type of conversation with a goal of evaluating the work and improving it to get the work to its fullest possible potential. And when we have regular multidisciplinary critiques, this can deliver lots of wonderful team building benefits, about 5 of which that I've identified for today. So number 1, when we bring everybody together for a critique, that gives everybody the opportunity to have a voice in what the work is going to be about and where it's going to go. I love hearing all sorts of different perspectives during your critique, whether that comes from stakeholders, strategy, leadership, QA, and IT or development. Critique also gives us plenty of clarity to complexities, allows us to ask questions, to innovate and to problem solve, and to get the entire team aligned on the overall direction of the work. And hopefully this will give us high quality designs and products. Ultimately, critique is a conversation with design goals in mind. So at Aten, the designs that we prepare for critique are not just done by me, all by myself in my apartment, all alone in isolation, siloed. It's not done by one person. Our work is deeply collaborative and multidisciplinary. The work that you see should be influenced by strategists, designers, front-end and back-end developers, accessibility and QA specialists, project managers, and senior leaders. We work to ensure all aspects of the work is meeting your goals and user needs. So by the time that the work gets to you, the stakeholder team, it has been vetted and has been bought in by everybody on Team Aten, I hope. And an important voice that's missing during those conversations, of course, is yours. So we turn to you and your stakeholder team to give the design a chance to be shaped by your expertise in your branding and marketing efforts, business and administrator goals, and of course, your audiences and users. Nobody is as deep of an expert as you are on your own end users and your audiences. So when we bring our work to you, hopefully it's already really sharp in terms of design, really thought out strategy and technology, but we really want to ensure that it's meeting your goals ultimately. So be ready to come to the meeting, ready to ask questions and have a conversation about what will be next for the design. Before I give you some tips on critique, I think it's important to take a step back and acknowledge that critique can be difficult. Not everybody is going to necessarily be a total pro at critique. Everybody is going to have their own unique skill set, comfort level, experience with critique, and people will also come to critique with their own ideas or concerns in mind, and we want to make room for that. So don't always worry about whether you're going to be saying the correct thing or the right thing or the most technical thing, or you're going to be speaking my language as a designer. That's not necessarily important. What we're looking for is honest, clear, and kind feedback. And we will always try to work with you to figure out where you're coming from, to find that common ground, to work toward a solution, and to identify that problem together. And I hope that today, what we can do is show you how critique can be used as a tool for becoming a better communicator, not only with us at Aten, but for your internal teams, to give smoother critiques to save time and budget, and to help meet your project goals, marketing goals, and organization goals. So when you come to a critique at Aten, you should be informed on the following from your design team. Number one, the goals of the discussion. 2, specific questions or issues to discuss. 3, context, process, and decisions behind the work. So let's say it's the first day of looking at design, really exciting day. This typically means that Aten will show you a homepage and a few additional key pages. Typically, we'll want to hear if the chosen design direction is working for the brand and if the features we agreed on are clearly coming to life. Are the layouts and elements working toward our goals? So, for instance, if we want the homepage to drive users to browse your organization's work and donate, that's a topic worth evaluating and discussing as we're looking at the homepage. When we're presenting a page or giving you a tour, we will often mention the objectives of a section or a page, let you know what those key decisions were around design, and then we'll try to ask specific feedback on items that we need your input on, or we need your priority on, or if we're really comfortable with where the work is right now, we'll just open it up to your entire team for feedback. So let's say on this homepage we're including 3 featured news items. We can evaluate this using a few objectives, such as, is the right number of news items showing? Should news items be featured or dynamically set up? Is the placement of news in the correct spot? Or does this layout reinforce or interfere with the broader objectives? When you come to a review with us at Aten, here are some really good questions to ask yourself while evaluating a design. Does this align with our goals and objectives? I know I've been talking about a lot, that should be obvious. Are elements clearly laid out and driving the user toward our goal? Are the aesthetics on brand? Is the functionality of the page clear? This means, do you understand what is going to happen when users will click on things, or how content is managed and populated? Do you understand what areas are going to be flexible when you build them, or custom coded by our team? Are the features correct? Is there anything missing? And then lastly, what details can be resolved in development? So take a mental note of smaller details such as font sizes, spacing issues. Maybe we have some placeholder content in there or images that might be best handled when the site is built. We love to show you really ideal and perfect designs and comps, but things may change a little bit as they translate into the final build. And so some of those smaller details might be addressed in the real life product rather in the design. I know that getting hung up on small details is really easy to get hung up on. It's really tempting. I even get hung up on those things sometimes. But again, sometimes it's best to take note of that and acknowledge those things separately. And we can provide some helpful tips on that. Okay, let's get into the fun part where we're talking about unhelpful feedback, what it means, and how it can be rephrased into really helpful, constructive feedback. Let's start by looking through some of these example quotes. I don't like this layout. This looks too busy. Revise this text to say this, or change this image to that, or this list needs to be reordered. People won't be wanting to dig for this information, so let's just make a big button to it right here. Who's going to be responsible for managing this content? So let's say that we're hearing or thinking this feedback while we're looking at, say, your organization's event detail page. The goal of this page is to quickly state key information like time, date, and location, and get users to sign up for the event. How can we interpret this feedback and rephrase it so we can get to a better design? So, starting with the first, I don't like this layout. This is too busy. Well, maybe what's actually going on is that the layout or the elements haven't solved the problem yet. Maybe the sign up button is lower on the page and is lost in the details. Maybe there are too many details on view right now. If we're talking about revising text or images or reordering things, this probably means that the design is looking good, it's working and as we intended, but there's some content on it that's unpolished. Maybe on this event page, we put in a drafted description of the example event, or we're using an image from your library that you don't prefer in this example. If somebody is saying something like, please, people won't be digging for this information, put a button over here, we call this prescriptive feedback, which is feedback that quickly finds the solution to the problem and doesn't necessarily invite much exploration or explanation on what the problem is. When we're talking about who's responsible for managing this content, this opens up to a conversation that might be important, but may not be appropriate for a design review. So let's say we're looking at your event page and we're looking at your sign up button, and then somebody is looking at that and says, well, how are people going to be signing up for this event? Do we want to do a native web form or a Zoom form or a MailChimp form? And then next thing you know, we're talking about how the conversation is going toward how the team will organize and manage the sign up list. And then it goes to how the team will email users leading up to the event. Again, this is a really important conversation we want to be having. We want users to be signing up for events, and we want to have a really great workflow for how they complete that task. But when it comes to the look and feel of the event page, that conversation isn't necessarily relevant. And so we need to find a way to have that conversation outside of the time in which we are evaluating the design. So how can we make all of this feedback more helpful? Back to the start. This layout's too busy. I don't like it. Maybe a better way to phrase it is, I think we're making the key task buried and harder to find. Revise this text to say, or revise these things. You know, I see some content that needs to be prioritized from when the site is built. That will call attention to the rest of your team to begin to make priorities or to make a plan for content that will need that extra attention for when the site is made. People won't be digging for this information, so we need a button right here. Again, prescriptive feedback. Let's open up that conversation a little bit more. One of my favorite phrases to think about is using, how might we do this? So instead of doing this, we can say, how might we do this? So in this example, how might we help the user navigate to this information? And then finally, if we're hearing a conversation that's kind of going sideways, maybe we can pause and say, hey, let's take this discussion offline and get the right number of team members together to chat about this further. Let's talk about types of helpful feedback out of the gate and how it works to impact the design. So let's read through some examples. 1, I'd like more exploration on this piece to be more on brand. 2, how might we simplify this layout so the user can more easily finish their task? I have thoughts on small details I'm seeing here. What's the best way to get that feedback to you? Our research indicates that users prefer a direction that's focused on this or that. So for the first one, where we're talking about creating more exploration on something to make it more on brand, this is a great way to frame an issue that's more aesthetic. Maybe the color or the typography isn't right. Maybe something visually isn't working for you. This will help frame the issue to determine if the design is authentic to the brand and is more focused on that rather than coming from a subjective personal preference on look and feel. If we're talking about simplifying the layout so the user can more easily finish their task, this helps identify the problem and reinforce the goal, but doesn't rush to the solution. Again, this is another way of avoiding prescriptive feedback and opening up the floor to more exploration. Again, another way to handle small details that you're seeing. This will help keep the call more open and focused on the larger objectives and allowing small details to be addressed. When you do want to talk about smaller details, the best way for us to handle that at Aten is through comments in Figma or notes in Basecamp, some sort of offline discussion, or maybe a separate call if we want to talk about those nuances in person. And then one of my favorite, but maybe one not always very common, is user research-based points. So it's always great to hear when there is a real life scenario or real life data or facts to help shape the direction of the work and to provide feedback that way. So here are some really quick tips on how to give good feedback to kind of summarize where we are now. So one, focus your feedback on meeting those goals, brand authenticity, and functionality. These are kind of the big things that we're looking for during a feedback session. Say what you want the goal or impact of the ideal work to be. Be specific on the problem or issue that you're seeing and avoid rushing to the solution. Open it up with a how might we phrase. Okay. Another thing that I hear a lot is when new features come up or when new features are tossed around during a design review. So why might it be possible that a new feature is suggested? I kind of see the suggestion kind of sitting on a spectrum of 1 to 3 things. So 1, we want to push the design to its full potential. That's going to be an enhancement. Or 2, we're starting to see the design, it's starting to get really real for us. And then our brain starts to think of more hypothetical scenarios or edge cases that we need to be solving for. And then we come up with features to solve those. Or maybe we don't have clearly defined objectives yet. And so that kind of leaves things really wide for this to go all over the place in terms of features. So what's an example of when a feature is brought up because we want to be enhancing the work and pushing the design a little further? So let's say we're working together on your community college's website. And right now we're reviewing your college's big admissions landing page. And we did a pretty good job laying out the elements into a static layout, but there's a problem. The layout is static. We know families and in-state and out-of-state students, high schoolers, and other groups will be visiting this page and have their own unique needs and will be seeking specific information that relates to them. So now this page isn't necessarily solving a problem yet and could use more exploration or enhancement. So a way to handle this might look like, well, a lot of our personas are going to be using this type of page, and I'm concerned that they might be lost or disoriented on a page like this. How might we explore some features so users can quickly self-select into their area of interest and take the correct action? That's an example of opening us toward an enhancement. We know the goal or the problem, the page isn't quite getting us there yet. So how can we introduce features or new things to add to the page to make it better? Okay, what if we're in a scenario where we're more talking about hypotheticals? So let's say we moved on in your community college's website, and now we're talking about your events calendar, and we're looking at a detail page for that. And somebody is saying, hey, well, what if this event is filling up? Let's show a tag that says how many seats are left. Or what if an event is postponed? Why don't we get people to sign up for email updates? Now, these aren't bad ideas. And in fact, if I heard these, I would be really excited to explore them. But solving for every single hypothetical or edge case can introduce features that may risk the scope and timeline. We can't solve for every single issue. Often it's because we have a limited time and budget. But what we can do is prioritize what is likely and useful for most users. So when something like this might be happening, maybe we can pause the discussion and ask, how should we prioritize edge cases or scenarios? We might want to take a few minutes to just list those all out together, or set up a separate call or an email thread to go through those issues. And then lastly, for the final one, where we may not have clearly defined objectives, an example might look like this. So you've gotten through your community college's main site design and now have shifted gears to creating an intranet for your students. let's say the dashboard includes an area for all sorts of features we've been talking about, like login links, alerts, key pages and tasks, and a news feed. And a couple of members of your team who work really closely with students are advocating for more features. Maybe somebody is talking about dynamically showing the login student staff advisor. Somebody else is saying, well, there are lots of students who work for the school and they'll need to switch to a staff view. Somebody is saying, hey, I want to see a banner with today's date on it, maybe even the weather. And maybe there's more and more features that are piled up on this. So to me, we might be in a place where we're really unclear about what the internet is meant to do and what its boundaries are. This makes us vulnerable to creating features without a clear vision on what the product is meant to do. So maybe we need to reassess those things and figure out where to go from there. So to kind of summarize this topic, when we are evaluating new features, here are some questions to kind of guide us. Why is a new feature being introduced? Does the feature get to solving the problem? Or is this new feature actually an indicator of hidden problems we've missed, discussions we haven't had yet? Does it mean that our discovery strategy or information architecture phases were too short or shallow? And do we need to rediscover some points? Are we dealing with an unclear scope or requirements? We might need to get at why the feature is coming up before we begin to solve for it. But I don't want us to, take this to the next call and, not suggest any new features because we're afraid of inflating the scope or making things go left field or taking the conversation in a wild place. That is fine for us to talk about whatever's on our mind, what we think is going to be helpful for the work. And we at Aten are your partners to help hear all your feedback and guide the conversation to resolve those problems. So again, don't be afraid to say what's on your mind whenever you're seeing the work. Let's now, with that, talk about how to disagree with somebody constructively and effectively, even if you're disagreeing with me, your designer, on a call. So here's some tips to help you disagree with reason and kindly and honestly. So summarize the idea that you're hearing or ask clarifying questions to fully understand the other person's point. Restate the goal. Reason how the idea may not be solving the problem yet. Empathize and listen to feedback. So let's say you're on a feedback call and the designer is showing your team a page for public events your nonprofit hosts. A colleague of yours who represents your organization's fundraising department might say something like, well, hey, we need sponsor logos right up here at the top and a big button to donate so that the public knows how events are funded. And plus, we could always use more partnerships and money. Your designer may not be ready to respond yet and may still just be in listening mode, listening to everybody in the room say what they want to, but you're welcome to speak up. So first, restate the other person's point in your own words to make sure you're understanding, or ask a clarifying question. You might say something like, so you want this page to be promoting sponsorships, is that correct? Anything else you want this page to be doing as well? Next, restate the goal as you understand it and reason how the idea might not be solving the problem just yet. I agree with you that generating more sponsorships and transparency is really important to this website. But I think what we want this page to be doing firsthand is to help families and visitors plan their day with us and discover exciting events and programming. How might we balance that with sponsorships as well? What if you want to disagree with me? What if something I am pitching to you as your designer isn't exactly working? So let's say that on that same events page for your nonprofit, you hear me say something like, well, all events are going to be requiring images because users are visual creatures and images will drive engagement. That may be true. Personally, I believe that, but that your team doesn't always have the resources to put up really good images, and that might be worrying to you. So consider saying something like, well, we would love to meet that goal someday, but right now we don't have the resources to put high quality images up there 100% of the time. We want this site to be easy to manage and sustainable as we grow. How might we be more flexible on images? It's always okay to push back on anybody on your team. And it's also good to note that we don't have to agree on an idea right away or come up with a solution. It's important during these times to hear everybody and to provide feedback. Next, what do you have to, or what can you say if you or somebody on your team is getting stuck? It's okay if you're stuck and don't have much to say right away, but here are some things to think about if you notice yourself being a little speechless during a feedback session. So first, maybe you just need a little bit more context around the work. Ask your designer to go back over an item or a section. Ask them why they decided to create that piece in that certain way. You might need to ask the designer to restate the goals or objectives of that piece to help clarify or loosen up maybe what you might be getting hung up on. Sometimes it's difficult to evaluate a really flat comp or a piece that is just kind of basically an image that we're showing you of what the final product might look like. And it might be good to ask questions about what the effects or animations or interactions will be, or what will happen when a user clicks on this or that. And that might help bring it to life a little bit better for you. It might also be good to ask for a prototype of that interaction as well. And then it's also okay to admit if the work just isn't really cutting the mustard for you yet. If you're feeling bored or confused, underwhelmed, or disconnected to it, if it doesn't feel authentic to the brand or meeting the spirit of what the project is going to be about, that's okay to say that. Remember to be clear and kind, but we as designers know that our work can emotionally impact people for better or worse. And so we want to hear that feedback if it is a little bit more subjective after all. Remember, we try to kind of meet you where you are and to translate what you are saying into constructive feedback to bring the design to a better place than where it is now. So never be afraid to say what's on your mind. And even if you don't have anything to say, it's all right to delay your feedback as well. So it might be helpful to wait a day or two to take another look at the work. We always share links to our designs with you after a feedback session. Get your internal team back together to review the work. It might be good to reach out back to us and ask for notes or questions or ideas on what needs to be reviewed to get you going. And then arrange a new call with us or send a write-up on email or Basecamp. Remember that critique is a wonderful collaborative conversational tool that we can use to always uncover design problems and to push the design to its fullest potential. So as you think about what's next for your website, know that you don't have to be alone. We at Aten Design Group are a team of talented designers, strategists, and developers who are passionate about client service. We offer top to bottom website redesign, branding reviews, design audits, UX strategy, stakeholder workshops, user research, and more to help you identify your goals and tap into the potential of your brand story. If you have questions about today's webinar, feel free to contact me. And if you're interested in partnering with Aten Design Group, reach out at work@aten.io. Thank you.